the diabolical minds of the madmen of Bandorus was created the most incredible plot ever conceived to conquer the world.
Why did you bring us here, really?
In a matter of hours, we will begin the conquest of the world.
Phil Day, undercover agent, trapped in the trap he set for the madmen of Mandorus. Professor Coleman, American scientist, believed his staggering discovery to be a secret.
Up to now, anthraquinine was the only known antidote. The loss or destruction of the formula for this antidote would mean complete annihilation of the world.
But he did not reckon with a group of evil men, men who will permit nothing to stop their rule of the world. What unknown force has been created to conquer the world? And which of the madmen pushed the panic button?
Somebody's got to get Vorak. I guess it's up to me, Casey.
It's VHS Massacre Radio. I am your host, Tom Seymour, and I'm here with Mr. Chris Ferry.
Hello.
And that, of course, was the 1968 classic. I know what you're saying. Classic is a strong word. That's strong language for such a film. The 1968 classic, They Saved Hitler's Brain. And we just heard some illustrious audio from the movie trailer, and the movie trailer actually does a decent job of selling the film, right, Chris? I mean,
sure. I mean, the trailer makes it look action-packed and fast-paced.
Yeah. So this was an interesting film. It was originally entitled "The Madmen of Mandorus," a fictional South American country. It was made as a TV movie in 1963. But it wasn't feature length. And so in 1967, let's say, they shot A New Beginning with totally different cast members. Walter Stocker as Phil Day and Audrey Carey as Casey Day. It also features Carlos Rivas, who was in True Grit and The King and I, and John Holland played the farmer in Chinatown. They did have some decent talent in it. I don't know. What did you think of the cast?
It was just a mishmash of so many different styles, right? I mean, it's not just the time leap of 5 years where you see, well, the whole film is black and white, but the style of clothing that they're wearing from the beginning and the rest of the movie is markedly different. So is the style of the dialogue, and so is the style of the acting. So it almost feels like there was zero effort made to try and sync the two things up. It was very bizarre.
Yeah, they didn't. I don't think any cast overlapped from the reshoot. Essentially, they added this whole beginning on with these two detectives trying to find out why this initial scientist was murdered. And so they find out that that this scientist had this secret antidote to this kind of nerve agent. And then they're in this room, and their boss is...
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, yeah, on this baby. They find out that, he wasn't the only scientist with the antidote. It was this other scientist who really had the antidote to this nerve agent. And so then they're referencing the actual original movie. And there's some parallel cutting. I mean, they do, I think, sneak in some scenes of the earlier footage before the end of the new stuff they shot. But yeah, I mean, even the hairstyles are wildly different. And there's this whole woman's lib angle, and the the detectives are very like shaggy haired, and it totally contrasts with the early 60s shot kind of in the style of a 50s TV movie.
I think even when the thing came out, it would have felt a little dated. In the early 60s, it would have felt a little dated. And to go back to the acting for a second, it's not that it's a bunch of yahoos who don't know how to behave in front of the camera. It's more that the styles are all over the place. The dialogue is mostly, it's just kind of wooden. It's not fantastic writing, but it's also not the worst writing we've ever seen. It feels like they're not getting a lot of help from the director. And, there's some seasoned actors in there who deliver their lines with confidence and charisma. And I think part of, I was going to say, it's just slow as molasses, but part of that is the time too. We've gotten acclimated to a much faster paced movie. It's hard to watch in a lot of different ways.
Well, like one of the things is the, like typically, especially in TV series of that era, I actually would be really curious to know if, just because it came on the television in 1963, I wonder if it was not shot a few years earlier than that.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Because the style of shooting was, if you look closely, it really looks like they reused the same set, like about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 times. Clearly, like the office set is the same thing as some of the houses, and so it feels very stagey. The two main characters, they realize that this the scientist has been killed, and so they're seeking this other new scientist, and then those two characters essentially just get killed off, and they start up with this other plot line about this person is seeking to find this other government agent, and they end up going down to South America, where you find out the Third Reich is actually reestablished, and they're trying to use this nerve gas to poison the town, but only the Nazis have the antidote, so they won't be affected. I mean, Chris, am I sort of ballparking this plot line in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're doing it as well as it can be done. Watching this movie it's the strangest experience of being incredibly slow and utterly confusing. So you'd figure that if they're taking this much time to sort of didactically lay out what's happening here and what they're trying to, that you'd get a clear picture of it. But it's like the more they talk, the more confusing it gets, right? The guy even says at one point, he's like, "Why me? What do you want me to do this for?" And I was like, exactly. Nobody's explained why these weird, mysterious people are like, "You, senor, you must come with us." And he's like, "Why? Who are you?" But he goes with them. Like, I don't, it's so, okay, I guess we're going to South America. And it just kind of, it manages to bore you and lose you.
There's some terminology in the trailer that's confusing. Like, how did you put it?
Even in the trailer, it says something like trapped in a trapeze set for, Professor Trap. It was just, I was like, wait, what? Like, if the trailer has verbiage that's confusing, it means they can't possibly say it in a concise way.
Yeah, it was like trapped in a trap that he set for himself. It's like, what?
There's this phase where they get there and people are kind of shooting each other, and then but eventually they end up kind of in a bunker. Like, they end up in the clutches of the Nazis. Yeah, and then it's sort of, then you have a team of white hats and black hats, rushing towards a conclusion, and then it sort of starts to make some narrative sense.
Like, as a TV movie, like, so it was 20 minutes shorter, and it was called The Madman of Mandoras. So I would imagine, I could imagine watching it not knowing that there's going to be basically a glass dome with Hitler's live head in it. I can imagine, like, if you were enduring that film and you finally got to that shot, you'd be like, what the fuck? This is crazy.
Yeah, because up until that point, there's no, I mean, if it's they saved Hitler's brain, it's kind of a, it kind of tips the hand right there. The Madman of Bandoris, pretty familiar stuff. And then suddenly it's like, bum, bum, bum. And you literally have the actors, apparently severed head in what looks like a cake jar. One of those glass things that you put over a cake display.
Like in a diner,
I actually thought the guy who played Hitler, like his performance as Hitler ranting and raving, was pretty good. Like he clearly watched the newsreels of Adolf Hitler, and he was doing the gestures and the voice and everything as he, and then they have some surgery montages but then from then on, he's just this kind of funny looking guy with a, the brush mustache, mugging at the camera, blinking his eyes and like sort of leering in the back of a car. He's like sitting in the back seat.
very exaggerated, like you said, mugging, like blinking his eyes. It's just like,
my Fuhrer, we're gonna get them now, and he'd kind of like roll his eyes and smirk.
Yeah. I mean, so that in effect is kind of the money shot of the whole film, and I didn't realize when I was looking at the Wikipedia how much this film has been referenced. The Simpsons referenced this thing a lot, 5 or 6 times, yeah. And then of course Futurama, essentially, they have characters that are, in the glass jar, and somehow there's something lasting about it. Although I never knew that those are references to this film,
I didn't either. I always assumed it's this sort of sci-fi trope. But yeah, you're right. In Futurama, isn't there like a whole council of people? They're just heads in jars that are like, the Galactic Council or something. And I had the thought, man, does that all come back to this idea? Is this the original idea of we've seen the disembodied brain floating, that's in Dune, that's in all kinds of stuff, but does it come back to this idea?
I was speaking with someone, they said that some of this Hitler craze, maybe in the 60s, was sort of a catharsis to sort of like digest the horror of some of the stuff that had happened. The funny part is how little it makes sense. Like in the film, like the guy is basically telling this guy somehow was witness to the surgery of this happening, and he was shot, but he wasn't killed. And he said Hitler had such a fear of death that as the Third Reich was crumbling, he preemptively had his head removed and transported to South America so that they could then find his body, I guess, and fool them into thinking that he had died. I mean, am I on the mark or what?
But if that detail was laid out in the film, I missed it. Like I was glazed over. But it's interesting to think about if say you had to remake this film today. It just seems to me like you actually could. If this is the 60s, so it's totally conceivable that there were high-ranking Nazi officials. Like, why does it have to be Adolf Hitler himself and his brain? Like, you could make a really plausible thriller like Hydra. There wasn't like John Hydra, and it's this organization of people that are following this evil agenda. I don't know. I just, putting his head in a jar ends up not being scary. How can it be anything but funny?
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. It's interesting that they put this on TV, but it made me want to dig into some of the history of the Nazis escaping to South American countries. Joseph Mengele is one person who escaped to Argentina, fled to South America in Argentina in 1949. Assisted by a network of SS members. He initially lived around Buenos Aires and then fled to Paraguay in 1959 and Brazil in 1960. all the while being sought by West Germany, Israel, and Nazi hunters. So the thing about some of these South American countries, I think specifically Argentina, was there was already a significant population of German, I guess, expatriates, you could call them, that were living there, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the crazy thing, and is that this happened. You know, you already had Mengele down there, you know?
Exactly. And there's enough truth to it. I'm saying that it's like, I mean, I just think it's so, I'm fascinated by the sci-fi angle of it. It's like, there's just so many different tangents you could have gone. You could have said, you know what? Hitler actually didn't commit suicide. He escaped too, and he's still alive and well. You know, you could say, you know, that. You could say Hitler, or, you know, his protege that nobody knew much about, or make up another Nazi that's Mengele scale or Goebbels scale that is carrying the banner, and maybe he's nuts and still talks to the Fuhrer in his, you know, mirror the way the Green Goblin does. I don't know, but they say, nope, here's what we're going to do. He had his head cut off and preserved. I just, it's bonkers.
Yeah, it's weird, and it like, first of all, I think there is some sort of connection with this idea of Mengele and his experiments. He did all these horrible experiments with twins, like removing arms and sewing them onto the other ones.
He was a monster.
It's just awful, really awful stuff. And so there is something that feels like appropriate to have
the horror,
the surgery of Hitler's head removed. But they easily, if they were going to go that way, they easily could have had like, hey, you know, it was little known that Hitler was severely injured, and we removed his head in order to preserve his brain. But they didn't do any of that. They just like, you could have fixed some of that stuff with just narration, you know. Chris, the crazy thing is there is a show called Hunting Hitler, and it actually it's a little whack, like it's a little ridiculous, but it's trying to say that Hitler may have escaped to South America. I don't know, that theory has been out there for a long time, and then there's even like a picture of an aged person that some people think is actually Hitler.
He's such a monster in our imaginations, and it was such a painful war that I think the idea of a boogeyman, you know, surviving or coming back after death, that's really what it is. It makes sense as a kind of a cultural what if.
They did burn the bodies. There was rumors that Russia, I think, had custody of the bodies, and they did some testing in modern era, and that's a conspiracy, is that when the bodies were tested, that it wasn't them or something. But
I see. Inconclusive, or definitely not. Yeah.
But that's the conspiracy, because the mainstream science, like, they examine the dental records and they're like, yeah, this is him. You know, like, there was no question. So it's pretty fringe stuff, but I think because some Nazis did get to South America, I think it just opens the door for people to make these crazy theories, you know?
Well, and we're seeing so much of it now in the age of the internet and deep fakes, and there was just this video about COVID.
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I don't know. Honestly, I've watched probably 10 different videos on.
There was one that actually came up in my Google News feed that I was reading about that was just so flagrantly, and they had a scientist on there who had decent credentials, and she was basically talking, I mean, I didn't see it, but it was basically talking about how this is all kind of a hoax, and, you know, it's in the drinking water sort of mindset. And but deliberately made, very, very deliberately made to confound and confuse and mislead. And it didn't a lot of these things don't seem to have a clear profit motive other than how many clicks I can get or how much buzz I can generate for look what I stirred up. And what's infuriating, it does real damage.
Yeah, well, some of them, for a fact, are selling books. Like some of them, I think. Look, I mean, like you could pick your conspiracy theory. You could pick UFOs, and you're going to tell me, like, hey, I don't see a direct line to revenue here. So why are people making up shit about UFOs? It's like, dude, people make up shit about UFOs. People make up shit about Bigfoot. They're gonna make up shit about COVID. Like, it's just a reality,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get UFOs and I get Bigfoot and I get it on things. I mean, I understand 9/11 and I understand COVID, like anything that's I even understand Hitler, like anything that's painful enough and causes a big reaction is going to be easy fodder for somebody who just wants to get a reaction and push buttons and manipulate minds. And it's the same kind of mindset of the guy who, got control of somebody's Nest camera and started talking to people through their Nest camera. It's always sort of like, let me kick the hornet's nest a little bit here, just because look how clever I am. But with Bigfoot and with aliens, I don't see the concrete harm that it does. Like Bigfoot, Mothman, it's kind of fun. It's kind of like, this guy says he saw it. And it's a ghost story that we can actually talk to somebody who swears he's an eyewitness. It's kind of fun. Or ancient aliens. Look, the Egyptians, how else could they have done this? It must have been aliens.
Yeah.
But when it's COVID, I mean, even 9/11, that foments distrust in the government, which is kind of already there. With COVID, it's a thing that is unspooling right now. And misinformation is... We already have a government that we're not getting a clear answer on anything. There's so many I don't knows that to throw incompetent leadership into it that are just trying to cover their own ass makes it worse. And then to have people jumping in being like, oh, the whole thing is a setup. People are dying. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, the 5G one is the weirdest one. There's videos people put like a ring of steel wool around their phone and it ignites the steel wool, and like, a bunch of people had to put out videos and go, look, this is how they did it. They just ran electricity through the steel wool. Like it's just fake, but the thing is, if people really believe that, if they really believe like it's some kind of like 5G radiation poisoning and you don't have to wear masks or gloves, that's gonna be a problem. That's gonna make people sick. Conspiracy theories. There's some more harmless than others. That Hitler's head is in a jar in South America.
This is what Hitler's head wants. Is for us to be.
That's a one. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's offensive, but I don't I don't know.
Is Hitler's head in a jar? Is it really offensive?
I don't know. I think. I mean, I don't. You'd wonder what was going through the writer's head, but they may have seen this as like a sort of revenge. Look, he's a head in a jar now. But I think I think the film is a real. It's a spectacle, and I stumbled across this. I had a DVD set of like 32 drive-in movies, and this was one of them. And I was scrolling through the titles. The last one I did was Night of the Minotaur, and which had Peter Cushing in it and Donald Pleasance, which was interesting. And this one, I was like, they saved Hitler's brain. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm gonna watch this, and I'm gonna make Chris Ferry watch it with me. Yeah, I would say.
I see the cultural impact it's had. I'm glad that I'm aware of it. I wasn't aware of it until now.
It's almost like that one shot, the reveal. They're in that large chamber, and there's like it's essentially a radio, and then his head in a fogged glass jar.
There are some highlight. I mean, some of the cinematography is really beautiful. it's funny because it's not all amateur garbage. It's like you can tell that professional filmmakers were involved in the making of this.
Yeah, a lot of their the South American sets looked exactly like Hollywood backlots of Old West towns.
Yeah.
They just hung a few decorations on the wall. And they're like, "Welcome to Mandoris." It's like, all right, sure,
Mandoris.
Yeah, well, I would recommend this one. I mean, and just as you called it, a Frankenstein film production of seeing clear, like the film starts out in a time era, close to 10 years in the future compared to how the film is halfway through, which is really bizarre. It's the most bizarre thing.
And visibly, like they don't even, for example, one of the agents has this sort of Sonny Bono mop of a hair and Sonny Bono mustache
Yes.
and the crazy like late 60s pointed collar. Like he's very mod, and they have this whole women's lib conversation where he's flirting badly with the other female agent. It's like, if you cared, you could have taken a thing of Brill cream and you could have put in this guy in a suit that had more, traditional collars, and you could have slicked back his hair and even pretended that you're in the same movie. But they were like, nah.
Nah, fuck it. And this is, according to Wikipedia, they lengthened the film by about 20 minutes with additional footage shot by UCLA students at the request of the distributor. And the distributor was Paragon Films. Okay, interesting. They must have been like, all right, let's make a feature out of this for the drive-ins. I would imagine this probably... in a sense, this is a perfect exploitation title because it's not exactly what you think it's going to be. It's marketed in a way to make it more exciting than it actually is. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I feel like if this was an assignment, if somebody said, look, here's 10 grand and I want you to make, it's got to be at least 75 minutes long, maybe 80 minutes long with credits. I want you to make a movie called They Saved Hitler's Brain. You'd have so much fun making that movie. Like,
oh, yeah.
And you would absolutely, Mars Attacks, you would steer right into that pulp exploitation mindset, and you would, the wacky science and the mustache twirling Nazis and all of that. You'd have a field day with it. Low budget,
Check it out as a historical, anomaly, I guess. They show Hitler's head, and then he's traveling in a car, and then they get in a car wreck at the end, and there's just like a wax. They make a wax bust of Hitler's head, and they just melt it, and it reminded me like
for a long time. Like they keep coming back to that shot. There's like, it cuts back to it like 4 times. This very, very cheap looking, mannequin head of Hitler melting. There's just so much of that. A guy gets out of a car and goes to check on a house, and I swear to God, it's a 1.5-minute shot. Like the camera follows him. He like parks the car. He unbuckles his seatbelt. He turns off the car. He hops out of the car. He shuts the door. He comes around the front of the car. We're still tracking with him. Crosses a long yard, up behind some trees, right? Yeah. Around the back of the house. Camera follows. It's just like, come on. So much filler.
I was thinking of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the Nazi's face melts. And you have to wonder if... Spielberg and Lucas were like, yeah, man.
100%. 100%.
This is from They Saved Hitler's Brain. Yeah.
100%.
They probably saw that shot and they're like, we can do better.
They're like, oh, yeah, we gotta melt the head, Yeah.
We'll put ice cream in ours.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Beyond that, I just wanted to throw in that... Horror Hound Weekend was, it's actually ongoing right now And they actually played VHS Massacre 2, my newest documentary. They played it on the Virtual Fest, and I got to do a really cool Q&A. So that was pretty sexy.
Awesome.
And they are screening this movie called Mutant Blast, which is a Troma film coming out. It looks like a ton of fun. They're screening it at 11 p.m. through the Horror Hound Virtual Fest. So people can, if they go to horrorhound.com, they can look at the Virtual Fest and buy a ticket, and then they can watch it. And
awesome.
Should be good. Well, thanks very much for exploring They Saved Hitler's Brain, Mr. Chris Ferry.
Thank you, Tom.
And we'll see you next time.